Welcome to a cozy corner of the world, a podcast that wraps you in warmth like a cozy blanket. Each episode features a carefully crafted story, woven to ease you into sleep with its soothing rhythm. Feel at ease knowing you can drift off to sleep at any point. The stories are uncomplicated and the voices are soft, creating a peaceful backdrop for your dreams. Whether you're with us for a moment or stay for the whole episode, this podcast is your retreat. So settle in, let go of the day, and allow a cozy corner of the world to guide you to a night of peaceful slumber. Let's ease into our story. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the quaint town of Willow Creek, its rays filtering through the large bay windows of the Harmony Dance Studio. Nestled on the corner of Maple and 3rd, the studio was a cherished gem among the locals, a place where the stresses of the day melted away with each graceful step and turn. Inside, the hardwood floors gleamed, polished to perfection, reflecting the soft, ambient light that filled the room. Mirrors lined one wall, doubling the room's spaciousness, and inviting dancers to watch their reflections glide across the floor with every practiced movement. As the clock chimed 6 in the evening, the regulars began to arrive for the adult beginners ballroom class, a weekly ritual for many. Couples and singles alike, they trickled in with easy smiles and friendly nods, shedding coats and scarves to reveal comfortable dance attire underneath. At the heart of this calm bustle was the class instructor, Evelyn, whose gentle demeanor and warm, encouraging smile made newcomers feel immediately at ease. With her hair pulled back into a soft chignon and a hint of lavender on her wrists, she exuded an effortless elegance that many of her students admired. "Good evening, everyone," Evelyn greeted as the last of the students found their spot on the floor. "Let's start with a quick warm-up to get the blood flowing." Pairs of feet began to match the rhythm of a light waltz playing from the vintage record player in the corner. The soft sway of the 3/4 time signature enveloped the room as Evelyn guided them through gentle stretches and foundational steps. The air was alive with the sound of shuffling feet and light laughter, the cadence a soothing, hypnotic beat that promised the strains of the day would soon be forgotten. A soothing breeze whispered through the slightly ajar window, carrying with it the scent of the blooming jasmine from the flower boxes outside. The room itself seemed to breathe in time with the dancers, the walls echoing back the soft patter of their steps, the comforting regularity of the music knitting together a tapestry of sound that was as much a part of the studio as the dance steps themselves. Grace, a regular attendee with a fondness for the foxtrot, took her place beside her partner, her face lighting up with anticipation at the evening's lesson. She had come to cherish these sessions, finding in the measured movements of dance a respite from her bustling job at the local bakery. As the notes carried through the air, she felt her thoughts drift away, carried off by the melody and the steady lead of her partner's hand at the small of her back. Beside her, Tom, a high school history teacher by day, was settling into the familiar routine, the cyclical hobby becoming a cornerstone of his otherwise unpredictable weeks. To him, this dance class was a sanctuary, a place where the world's chaos was relegated to the edge of the dance floor, waiting patiently for the music to cease. And so the class began in earnest, feet gliding, bodies swaying, the group moving as one under Evelyn's watchful eye. Each step was a quiet affirmation, each beat a gentle nudge towards mindfulness and connection. The dancers found solace in the repetition, in the knowledge that for the next hour, their lives would be nothing but the rhythm, the melody, and the gentle guidance of Evelyn's voice as it wove through the air. And 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, keep floating just like that. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about feeling the music and letting it guide you. The class proceeded, each participant slowly becoming more attuned to their own rhythm, their bodies syncing with the gentle tide of music that rolled through the studio. For those in attendance, this was more than just a dance class. It was a small, sacred ceremony, a celebration of tranquility and grace that came from the synchronized steps and the trust placed in a partner's guiding hand. Students moved across the floor with increasing confidence, their initial hesitations giving way to a ard confidence. The sight was akin to watching a field of flowers sway gently in a breeze, each movement natural and unhurried. This was their oasis, their weekly pilgrimage to a place of serenity, where every pivot and twirl was an antidote to the rattling pace of the world outside. All eyes were drawn to Evelyn as she demonstrated the next sequence, her fluid motion reminiscent of a leaf dancing on a wind current, each gesture a quiet testament to the beauty of controlled movement. She moved among her students, offering soft-spoken words of encouragement, a reassuring touch to correct a posture, her presence as comforting as the atmosphere she had so lovingly cultivated within these four walls. As the class continued, deftly stepping from waltzes to rhythmic tangos, the Harmony Dance Studio wrapped its attendees in a velvety cloak of repose, the worries of the day slipping away with every beat, every step, every breath that filled the warm, inviting space. Each face in the room, whether creased with age or glowing with youth, was alight with the simple, profound joy that only comes when one is fully present, fully engaged in the embrace of the moment. And in the soft, golden light of the studio, surrounded by the tender strains of the music and the soft shuffle of feet on the old oak floor, it was easy to believe that everything was just as it should be. A perfect harmony between motion and stillness, between the heartbeats of the dancers and the gentle pulse of the world outside the studio's nurturing walls. The music swelled to a crescendo, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath, the dancers poised in anticipation. With a simple nod from Evelyn, they transitioned flawlessly into a new routine, feet tapping and skirts twirling in a seamless display of communal joy. New to the class that evening was Sophie, a young florist whose shop provided blooms to half the town. She stood near the back, slightly out of sync, her cheeks flushed with the effort of keeping up, her eyes focused intently on Evelyn's every move. Despite the initial stumbles, there was a spark of pure delight in her movements, a visible eagerness to embrace the dance. She laughed softly at her missteps, her laughter joining the harmonious symphony of sound that filled the studio. Nearby, George and Harriet, a couple married for 4 decades, moved with a quiet assurance that came from years of shared rhythm. Even in the simplest of steps, their deep connection was evident, spoken in the silent language of their interlaced hands and synchronized breathing. They needed no words to communicate. Their dance said it all, a testament to the life they had built together, step by measured step. The air was now threaded with melodies and a subtext of friendship. The dancers not just moving to music, but to the pulse of camaraderie that bound them all. The familiarity was palpable, the comfort of the weekly gatherings infusing each participant with a sense of belonging. For many, this hour was sacred, a time to shed their titles of parent, employee, or neighbor and simply be. Evelyn paused the music, the abrupt silence causing a ripple of laughter to spread across the floor. "Let's take a moment to catch our breath, shall we?" she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper, yet easily heard over the now quiet room. She walked to the window, pushing it open a bit further. A gentle breeze drifted in, carrying with it the faintest hint of the evening's coolness, reminding the dancers of the world outside their safe haven. As the dancers milled about, grabbing sips of water or exchanging pleasantries, the sounds of their quiet conversations were a melody of their own. The clink of water bottles and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards as they relaxed became a natural cadence, the studio's version of a pastoral symphony played in an urban setting. Sophie caught Evelyn's eye and ventured forth a shy smile, her earlier unease giving way to contentment. "I'm not quite sure I've got the hang of this yet," she admitted, her voice tinged with the musical lilt of her laughter. Evelyn approached her, her movements graceful, her presence reassuring. "Every dancer starts with a first step," she said, placing a kind hand on Sophie's shoulder. "The important thing is to find joy in every movement, no matter how small." The beginner dancer nodded, absorbing the instructor's words as if they were nutrients for her fledgling confidence. She watched as Evelyn returned to the center of the room, reclaiming her role as the class's gentle shepherd, ready to guide them back into the dance, back into the shared journey of discovery and grace. Meanwhile, at the edge of the dance floor, Frank, the town librarian, swapped his scholarly demeanor for a sheepish grin. He was a stark contrast in his tweed jacket and bow tie among the casual attire of the other dancers. However, he reveled in the weekly escape, the opportunity to transform from curator of books to a student of rhythm. His usual reticence faded as he took tentative steps under the forgiving gaze of his fellow classmates, a small crowd among which he felt an unusual kind of kinship. As the break waned, Evelyn called the dancers to attention once more. "Let's slow things down a bit," she suggested, swapping the previously lively record for something softer, more reflective. The plaintive strains of a classic ballad filled the studio, the tempo inviting a more introspective pace, a chance for each dancer to truly connect with the music, and in turn, with themselves and their partners. The class reconvened on the floor, finding their positions with a comfort born of weekly repetition. And as the new melody hugged the corners of the room, the dancers eased into a slower rhythm. They moved through the space with an organic patience, allowing the music to cradle them, to speak to parts of themselves often silenced in the noise of day-to-day life. In the newfound stillness of the slower dance, the studio seemed to wrap its arms around its inhabitants, the sense of calm deepening. The walls, adorned with vintage dance posters and faded photographs of legendary dancers, seemed to watch over the scene with approval. The past blinked from within those frames, whispering stories of bygone eras where dance was not just a pastime, but a language, one that transcended words and found expression in the shared silence of the studio. As partners found their stride, their movements became less about learning the steps and more about feeling the essence of the dance. The beauty was not in perfection, but in the presence, each person there not just as a student, but as an integral thread in the tapestry of the evening. They were a community within the music, within the walls of the Harmony Dance Studio, where each lesson was less about the steps and more about the journey they took together, a journey into the calming embrace of dance and the shared rhythm of their beating hearts. The music slowed even further as the class moved into a sunlit stretch of time, each note elongating like the evening's shadows that crept across the floor. In these moments, the space between the beats grew, allowing for breaths to be taken and savored, for glances to be exchanged that spoke volumes in their quiet understanding. Amongst the dancers there was Leonard, with his stoic demeanor softened by the melodic cadence of the dance. His usual solitude, a companion in his work as a watchmaker, was set aside in favor of the shared tempo of the class. Here, he found solace not in the tick of clockwork, but in the human connection made tangible by every shared step and supportive smile. Each session was a reminder of the world's synchronous nature, the way individual parts came together to create a movement both elegant and timeless. The class flowed smoothly, and so did the dancers' thoughts, each allowing themselves to be carried by the ebb and flow of the music. Evelyn's teaching style, akin to the gentle ebb and flow of the nearby Willow Creek, encouraged her students to surrender to the moment, to be carried by the tides of the tune. The dancers' bodies seemed to soften, each muscle unwinding as if in harmony with the notes that cradled them. For some, like Sophie, the dance was an escape, a whisper of freedom caught between work and responsibility. For others, like George and Harriet, it was a continued affirmation of their lifelong duet. For Frank, the librarian, it was a welcome plot twist, a deviation from the storylines that populated his daily routine. Each dancer had their motive, yet on the dance floor, they united in a single pulsating heartbeat. As the song reached its final phrase, the dancers slowed to a stop, their breaths coming slower now, their bodies a map of the exertion and release of the session's movements. Evelyn allowed the record to spin into silence before meeting the eyes of her class, each person returning her look with a deep, satisfying exhaustion that spoke of a job well done, of an hour spent in pursuit of something intangible, yet as real as the sweat upon their brows. "Thank you, everyone," Evelyn said, her voice low and filled with heartfelt gratitude. "You've all done beautifully tonight." Murmurs of thanks and soft nods were her reply, the connection between teacher and student evident in the mutual respect that filled the room. As the students gathered their belongings, preparing to step back into the world outside, the sound of quiet conversation resumed. It was the sound of a community being stitched tighter with every shared laugh, with every "see you next week." Sophie lingered, her eyes scanning the room as if wishing to capture this moment, to keep it close for the days ahead. "This is a special place," she said to Evelyn, who was meticulously lowering the needle from the record. "It is," Evelyn agreed, her smile speaking of her own love for the studio, for the lives that filled it. "And it becomes even more special with every new dancer that joins us." Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting a warm amber glow on the path that led away from Harmony Dance Studio. The night had drawn her curtain around the town of Willow Creek, and yet inside the studio, there remained a lingering light, the afterglow of music and movement that refused to be dimmed by the setting sun. As the last of the students stepped out into the evening, with the soft closing of the door and the final click of the lock, the studio stood silent, the whispers of the dance lingering in the still air. The warmth of the session past seemed to soak into the very walls of the space, a memory that promised a welcome return for those who had made this corner of the world a part of their weekly ritual. And so the night settled in, the quiet hush enveloping the town, wrapping each home, each heart in a gentle, unseen embrace. It was the kind of peace that came only after moments of connection, of shared experience, the kind that Harmony Dance Studio offered like a steady hand in a tumultuous world. It was there, in the after hours of the dance class, that one could almost hear the collective sigh of contentment from the day's participants, a sigh that said, without need for words, that all was well, that they were a part of something truly beautiful, something that danced to the same rhythm as the human heart. As the evening deepened, the studio's interior basked in the serene quiet, its tranquility a stark contrast to the communal energy that had infused it just moments before. The echoes of laughter and music seemed to settle into the floorboards, becoming part of the studio's timeless charm. For those who had left, their steps echoed down the streets of Willow Creek, carrying with them the subtle transformation afforded by the evening's dance. They moved through the world with a different cadence now, each one altered, however slightly, by the shared experience of the class. The feeling was akin to wearing a new garment, not yet fully broken in, but already cherished for its comfort and fit. In their homes, the quiet routines of evening began. Dancers swapped their soft shoes for slippers, their elegant attire for the familiar embrace of knit sweaters and worn jeans. Meals were prepared with a leisurely attention, the evening's class infusing even the simplest tasks with a newfound grace. Kettles whistled, the sound merging with the soft hum of street life that continued outside their windows. Within the walls of his library, Frank shelved the last of the day's returns, his mind replaying the steps of the evening's class. As his fingers brushed the spines of the books, he marveled at how the dance had allowed him to step into a different narrative, if only for an hour, a subplot where he was more than the sum of his collected knowledge. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of his workplace, the realization was his to savor. The dance, a plot line he looked forward to continuing. Elsewhere, Sophie closed the door to her flower shop, the scent of roses and lilies following her as she locked up. Her mind drifted to the swish of fabric against her legs as she danced, a sensation that seemed to echo in the rustle of the flowers around her. The connection between her work and her newfound passion was a tender thread, one that tugged at her heart with the promise of new joys. And in a cozy home at the edge of town, George and Harriet shared a cup of tea in their well-worn living room. Their movements around each other, speaking of a lifetime of shared routine and deep affection. Their evening waltz may have taken place in the dance studio, but the harmony of their relationship continued within the walls of their home, expressed in every glance and every quiet act of love. Meanwhile, Leonard's shop was a study in stillness, the ticking of clocks the only accompaniment to his contemplative mood. The precision required for his work had always been a source of pride, but the freedom found in dance was a reminder that there was solace in the unpredictable too, the spontaneous shifts of real life that kept every day interesting. Back at the Harmony Dance Studio, Evelyn performed her final tasks of the evening, the rituals of closing becoming a dance of their own. She wiped down the bars and adjusted the mirrors, her reflection an echo of the countless instructors who had moved through similar movements in spaces like this throughout time. In these quiet moments, she felt the weight and wonder of her role as a facilitator of joy and embodiment, a steward of an art form that spoke when words felt insufficient. After everything was in its place, Evelyn turned off the lights one by one, the studio dimming with each flick of a switch. In the lingering quiet, she paused for a final moment, allowing herself a solitary dance, her body moving to a silent melody felt deep within her bones. It was a private benediction, a silent thank you to the space that had become her second home and to the people who filled it with such vibrant life each week. Finally, Evelyn stepped out into the night, locking the door behind her, the key in her hand cold and solid, a metal benediction. She took a deep breath of the night air, each star above a silent witness to the gentle pulse of the town below. And as the dancers of Willow Creek settled into their evenings, the memories of the night's class were like a warm blanket, a shared serenity they could draw around themselves. It was a gift from the dance, a timeless reminder of the beauty found in connection and the simple, profound truth that no matter where life's music took them, they were all, in some way, dancing to the same rhythmic heartbeat of existence. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, casting a pale glow over the slumbering town, Willow Creek embraced the stillness of night. Behind the closed doors and shuttered windows, the day's fatigue began to ebb, leaving room for reflection and dreams. Sophie found herself at her kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea cradled between her hands, her thoughts adrift like petals in the wind. With each sip, the floral aroma brought her back to the studio, reliving the feeling of floating across the floor, a contrast to the earthiness of her work with stems and soil. Her mind replayed the ball, evening class, the gentle guidance of Evelyn, the laughter that spilled as freely as the music. It was an echo of joy that lingered long after the last note faded, as she contemplated the newfound space for dance in her life, a space that bloomed wide and inviting like the flowers in her care. In another part of town, George sat in his favorite armchair, a book unopened in his lap, Harriet's head resting against his shoulder. Their shared silence was a blanket of comfort, woven from years of companionship. They needed not the sound of music to feel the rhythm of their partnership. It was there in their very breaths, in the rise and fall of chests that had long since learned to breathe in unison. The subtle sway of their dance earlier that evening lingered in their limbs, a reminder that no matter the years they shared, there was always a new step to learn, a new path to explore, side by side. Meanwhile, Leonard's small workshop was dark, but the memories of the studio's laughter and light stayed with him. He had left behind the meticulous orderliness of gears and springs for the evening's fluidity, and now, in the quiet of his home, he contemplated the contrast. Within the maze of timepieces, each second was accounted for, each tick a marker of precision. Yet his spirit had soared in the open expanse of the dance floor, where time was measured in beats and breaths, not seconds and minutes. It was a revelation that continued to wind its way through his thoughts, like the gentle unwinding of a watch's mainspring. Frank, too, sat amidst the quiet company of his books, the titles on the shelves standing like old friends who had witnessed his personal storyline evolve with the inclusion of these weekly dance sojourns. The characters and plots that surrounded him spoke of adventure and discovery. and he smiled at the notion that he had embarked on his own unexpected journey. Each step, each pivot was a sentence in a chapter he hadn't planned to write, but which now added depth and color to the narrative of his life. Back within the now silent walls of the Harmony Dance Studio, the residue of motion and music remained. It was as if the space itself held the memory of the steps that crossed its floor, the echoes of which would resonate until the dancers return. Here, within the embrace of solitude, the floors rested, the mirrors stood sentry, patiently awaiting the next gathering of souls seeking solace in the shared language of dance. Outside, Evelyn walked the short distance to her home, her steps unhurried, her mind at ease. She passed the softly glowing windows of her neighbors, each pane a tableau of the lives within, lives touched in some small way by the studio's magic. The lessons she taught went beyond steps and sequences. They were lessons in life itself, in finding balance and beauty in the everyday, in embracing the pulse of joy that threaded through even the most mundane moments. Evelyn turned the key in her own front door and stepped into the warmth of her haven. With a satisfied sigh, she sank into her couch, allowing the quiet to envelop her. The fabric of the cushions, the familiar creak of the floorboards as she settled, each was a note in the symphony of home. In the aftermath of the dance class, the world seemed a little gentler, a little more forgiving, and Evelyn basked in the glow of her creation. A community united by the simple desire to dance, to connect, to be part of something that transcended the individual and spoke to the universal. The collective energy of the class might have dissipated with the night, but the individual lights it had ignited in each participant shone on, beacons guiding them through the darkness. In sleep, the dancers of Willow Creek would glide across dream-lit ballrooms, their steps assured, their hearts light. Tomorrow would come with its own rhythm, its own challenges and charms, but for now they rested in the peaceful interlude, in the quiet hours between the last dance and the first light of dawn, a time for repose, for renewal, and for the heart to whisper its nocturnal secrets to the slumbering world. In her bed, Sophie hugged her pillow a little closer, her chest rising and falling with the deep, even breaths of one who has found a novel joy. The whisper of dance shoes on the studio floor played in her mind, a lullaby that guided her into dreams tinted with the gentle hues of the evening's class. Her sleep was filled with visions of stepping lightly into a field abundant with her flowers, each bloom swaying as if to an unheard waltz, a dance of petals and fragrance. Across town in their quiet abode, George and Harriet shared more than just their nightly rest. They shared the subtle dance of memories, their minds adrift in recollections of dances past and the promise of those yet to come. Even in sleep, their bond was a dance, a quiet harmony of shared years and whispered affection. Leonard lay in his bed, the precision of his world giving way to the fluidity of dreams, where time was not a constraint but a canvas. Here, against the backdrop of his slumbering consciousness, he moved with a freedom ungoverned by the meticulous hands of the clocks he tended. In these nighttime reveries, he danced along seconds and minutes, the very essence of time, his partner in an endless, ethereal ballroom. Frank's home was silent, save for the occasional turning of a page as he delved into one last chapter before bed. The stories he read were gateways to other worlds. Much like dance had become an entrance to new realms of experience. Tonight, as each word wove its narrative spell, it was underscored by the memory of the dance studio, a subplot that enriched the core storyline of his life. And in the quiet of her home, Evelyn sat wrapped in a hand-knit afghan, a book open on her lap as she relished the solitude that balanced her role as the dance class's nurturing heart. Her eyes traced the lines on the page, but the energy from the evening pulsed in her veins, a silent yet potent reminder of the joy she facilitated each week. There was a contented smile on her face as she marked her page, surrendering to the call of rest. The town of Willow Creek felt different at night, slower, as if it were catching its breath after the rhythm of the day. The streetlights stood as sentinels, their glow a promise of safety and warmth. Houses were snug, their foundations steeped in stories and the soft murmurs of those who dreamed within. As the hands of the clock inched toward midnight, the tempo of the world shifted to a slow, steady beat, an echo of the gentlest dance, one that whispered of tranquility and the preciousness of quiet hours. It was a time for the day to fold into itself, for the anticipation of a new morning to bubble just beneath the surface. And all the while, the dance studio waited in the silence, a vessel filled with the promise of music and movement, of lives briefly intertwining and hearts beating in unison, a place where the simple act of dance was not just a sequence of steps, but a journey into the warm embrace of communal solitude. As the moon's silver light streamed through the windows of each home, casting gentle shadows that mirrored the peaceful cadence outside, the residents of Willow Creek lay dreaming, their breaths the softest music, their hearts the dancers in the night's quiet ballet. Tomorrow would bring with it the return to routine, the ebb and flow of a town in motion. But for now, in these hushed moments, the only dance was the one of the chest gently rising and falling, a silent testament to the day's end and the comforting embrace of the night. And in that universal pause, as Eileen finally closed her eyes and the town surrendered to repose, there was a shared knowing that they would all come together again to step and turn and glide, to dance in the home they built within the rhythm and heartbeats of Willow Creek's Harmony Dance Studio. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky with strokes of pink and orange, Willow Creek awoke to the soft, tentative beginnings of a new day. The dance of nighttime dreams gave way to the waking ballet of morn in routines, a dance that was more perfunctory, but no less vital to the rhythm of life. Birdsong filled the air, a natural melody that signaled the start of the day. It accompanied the townspeople as they emerged from their homes, each step punctuated by the crisp sounds of the morning. Dew glistened on the grass, each droplet catching the rising sun and casting prisms of light onto the sidewalks and streets. Sophie was one of the first to greet the day, opening the door to her flower shop and breathing in the scent of fresh earth and greenery. The memory of the previous evening's dance still lingered in her movements as she arranged bouquets and trimmed stems, a smile gracing her lips with the private recollection of joy. George and Harriet, too, began their morning with a routine that echoed the dances of their life together. Their hands brushed as they passed each other mugs of coffee, a silent dance that required no music to sustain its rhythm, their companionship a choreography refined by time and love. As Leonard unlocked his shop, the methodical ticks and tocks of countless watches and clocks greeted him, a reminder of the ceaseless march of time. Yet, nestled within that precision was a newfound appreciation for moments unplanned, the impromptu twirls and dips of life that brought a sense of spontaneous delight. Frank, on his walk to the library, paused to appreciate the soft sway of the trees and the gentle morning breeze. He reflected on the lessons learned on the dance studio floor, the movement and connection that had infused his solitary world with an unexpected vibrancy. And Evelyn, passing by the studio on her morning walk, peered through the windows at the quiet space that would soon again pulse with the life and motion of her students. She held the key that unlocked more than just the door. She held the key to a place where laughter, friendship, and the art of dance blended to create something truly special. Throughout the day, the people of Willow Creek moved through their hours, each one carrying with them a subtle trace of the studio's influence. The point was never about mastery of the dance. Rather, it was about the small ways in which the dance mastered them, gently guiding each day with the soft hand of music, the silent beat of shared experiences. As dusk approached and the sky donned its evening colors, the Harmony Dance Studio awaited its nocturnal awakening. For Evelyn, and for all those who had come to call the studio home, there was the comforting knowledge that the dance would always be there, a constant in an ever-changing world, a sanctuary of sound and movement, a haven for the heart. There, in the quaint and charming setting of a dance class in a small town, the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary. A place where the simplest of movements could encapsulate the myriad complexities of life, and where the beat of music became the heartbeat of a community. And as the lights of the Harmony Dance Studio flickered on, signaling the beginning of another evening class, the hearts of Willow Creek's residents once again synchronized to the rhythm of their beloved ritual. Embraced by the warmth of the studio's golden glow, they stepped forward into the dance, their movements a celebration of the life they shared, their every step a testament to the enduring allure and transformative power of dance. In Willow Creek, within the walls of the Harmony Dance Studio, the dance went on, an ever-renewing cycle of grace and joy, a flowing river of rhythm in the heart of a town where the simple pleasures of life were not just appreciated, but cherished. And in the embrace of that dance, in the gentle guidance of Evelyn, and the quiet strength of the community, all were reminded of the everlasting dance of life, the dance that, with each passing day,